This picture shows a rock that's over 1 billion years old, and one right above it that's under 550 million years old. So where is the almost 500 million years of missing time in between? Today we're talking about the Great Unconformity of Texas, which I got to visit on a Geological Society of America field trip. But before we unpack what's going on here, what is an unconformity? An unconformity in geology is a gap in the geologic record. For example, when two layers of rock right next to each other have very different ages, meaning that there's missing rocks in between, or rather, missing time. Unconformities represent periods of time in which rocks either weren't being deposited or they were deposited but then later eroded. There are three main types of unconformities. One, disconformities, which are erosional surfaces that separate two parallel layers of sedimentary rock of different ages. So say one layer of sedimentary rock was deposited, then another, but then that second layer got eroded away, and then a third layer was deposited on top of that eroded surface of the first layer. That's how you get a disconformity. Two, an angular unconformity, which is a similar concept, but now the bottom layers have been tilted, then eroded, and then new horizontal layers deposited, so that the unconformity itself looks, well, angled. And three, a nonconformity, which is when younger sedimentary rocks are resting on older igneous or metamorphic basement rocks. And this is what the Texas unconformity represents. 500 million year old sedimentary rocks sitting on billion-year-old granite. So what is this Great Unconformity of Texas, and why did it form here? Well, first I want to clarify that we're talking about the Great Unconformity of Texas, not the much more famous Great Unconformity, which can be found in the Grand Canyon. This famous Great Unconformity is similar to the Great Unconformity of Texas in that it is also a nonconformity, where Cambrian sandstones rest directly on Precambrian basement rock. But in some places, there's over 1 billion years of time missing, which is a tad more than what's missing here in Texas. That more famous Great Unconformity has been linked to massive erosion associated with supercontinent breakup and possibly the near global snowball Earth glaciations. And although the Texas version didn't form by the same event, it did form through similar processes and also represents a very large gap in time, nearly 500 million years. But to understand how it formed, we need to understand the Llano Uplift. I just covered the geologic history of the Llano Uplift in this video, which I'll link below, so I won't get into too much detail here, but just a brief summary. Essentially, this uplift is a large area of Texas where granites, gneisses, and schists were formed and metamorphosed during the formation of the supercontinent Rodinia, around 1.3 to 1.1 billion years ago, then buried and re-uplifted during the formation of Pangea, then buried again and uplifted for a third time in the last 15 to 20 million years. And Enchanted Rock is a wonderful place to view and stand on the granitic part of this uplift. But along the edges of this uplift are places where you can find the contact between those over 1 billion year old basement rocks and the 500-ish million year old Cambrian sediments. And that's the Great Unconformity of Texas. So why aren't there any rocks between these two layers? Well, because the Precambrian basement rocks were uplifted and exposed at Earth's surface above sea level for hundreds of millions of years, between around 1.1 billion years ago and 540 million years ago, there wasn't really any sediment accumulating there. I mean, think about terrestrial environments today. Sediment is not getting deposited there. If anything, there's more erosion than deposition. Although the occasional lava flow or wind-blown dune migration might deposit rocks on land, the majority of sediments are deposited in water. Rivers, lakes, oceans. So it wasn't until sea level rose and this area of Texas became covered in a shallow sea that sediments got deposited on top of these billion-year-old basement rocks, and that happened to be in the Cambrian around 540 million years ago. However, I want to make it really clear in this video because I feel like anytime you talk about any great unconformity, people always end up asking, how can we know what happened throughout Earth's history if we're missing that much of the geologic record? And here's the thing, just because rocks weren't being deposited here between 1.1 billion and 540 million years ago does not mean that they weren't being deposited elsewhere. Pretty much any time you have an unconformity or missing time in the rock record, there is another place on Earth where rocks were being deposited because seas were there. The only exceptions to that rule would be like very, very early Earth before oceans and land even formed, and potentially during the snowball Earth events, because near global glaciations mean very little sediment deposition, at least the land to water transport type deposition. That said, even during snowball Earth events, we think those depositional processes were still operating near the equator. So typically, when we see that rocks weren't being deposited in a particular location during a certain time interval, that just means water wasn't there. It was elsewhere, at least most of the time. Anyway, if you've enjoyed my series of Texas geology videos and want to come explore Texas geology for yourself, there is a perfect opportunity coming up. On the upcoming Roadside Geology of Central Texas and Hill Country Field Trip this April, you can explore all these locations on the screen while learning about their geology. And you can find more information about this and other upcoming GSA field trips linked in the description box below. Bye! Suk, tell the people that you refuse to sit next to me and be in the video. It's not my fault.